The alien baron abandoned his disabled daughter in the desert, but a human saw her true worth. The sun beat down mercilessly on the endless desert of Karos. The sand shimmered like liquid gold, stretching to the horizon where the sky met the dunes. Heat waves rose in trembling lines, making the world seem unreal, as though it existed in a dream. In the middle of that burning expanse, a small figure struggled, moving slowly, carefully, but determined. She was a child, small and fragile, yet her dark eyes held a quiet strength that no one could have predicted. Her name was Scifi. To anyone from her own world, she was worthless. She had been born different, a child whose mind did not connect the way others did. Her species prized telepathy above all else. Every decision, every thought, every communication was linked through their minds. Those who could not connect were seen as failures, and failures had no place in their noble houses. Scifi had always known she was different. She could hear the faint hums of the desert winds and see patterns in the sand that no one else could. She could feel the rhythm of life in the small creatures that darted in and out of the dunes, but she could not feel the thoughts of others. She could not join the endless streams of communication that her people called life, and for that, she had been abandoned. Her father, Baron Threxel, had left her here, on this endless plain of heat and sand, declaring her unworthy of life. He had turned his ship away without a backward glance, leaving her alone to die, as his house and title demanded. She remembered the moment the ship had lifted off the dunes. The shadow of its hull had stretched over her, a final reminder of how small and insignificant she was supposed to be. And yet, as the dust settled, she did not cry. She did not give up. She simply stood and looked at the horizon, as if the desert itself was a challenge she would meet. The first hours were the hardest. The sun burned her skin, and her throat ached from thirst. Every instinct screamed at her to hide, to curl up and surrender, but she refused. Scifi had learned to survive in ways no one had thought possible. She used the sharp edges of the rocks to cut shallow grooves in the sand, marking the time. She dug a shallow trench to catch the rare drops of condensation that formed at night. She remembered her father's cruel words, not as an insult but as a promise to herself. She would prove that life was not only for those who fit the mold. On the second day, she spotted movement on the horizon. At first, it was just a shimmer, a wave that danced with the heat. Then, as it drew closer, she saw the shape of a vehicle, a human machine. Humans were rare visitors to Karos. Most of them came for trade or research, but they seldom traveled into the desert alone. The sight of one brought a flicker of hope, and Scifi's tired limbs moved faster, her bare feet sinking into the hot sand as she ran toward the approaching figure. The human, Jonah Hale, was not expecting to see a child in the desert. His rover had been scanning the heat signatures for small pockets of life, a task that often led to disappointment. But today, the scanner had picked up something unusual, a faint but steady pattern that was clearly alive. Jonah's curiosity was piqued. He steered the rover toward the source, unaware that he was about to find something extraordinary. When he saw Scifi, she was lying in the sand, her body small and covered in dust, but her eyes sharp and alert. She raised her hand in a tentative greeting, not speaking because she could not speak the way others did. Jonah stepped out of the rover slowly, careful not to startle her. He crouched a few feet away, letting her see that he meant no harm. "Hey there," he said softly. "Are you okay?" Scifi studied him. His voice was strange to her ears, low and melodic, different from the thoughts she had never been able to hear. She shook her head, then pointed to her throat, indicating that she could not speak in the way he might expect. Jonah nodded, understanding that communication would have to be different. He reached into the rover and pulled out a small tablet. On it, he drew simple pictures: water, food, shelter. Scifi's eyes lit up as she recognized the meaning. She responded by drawing patterns in the sand, showing where she had found small cacti and shallow water pools. Jonah watched carefully, fascinated by her methods. This was intelligence, pure and raw, expressed in ways that were unfamiliar to him but perfect for her. As the sun began to set, Jonah prepared a small shelter for her. He knew that the desert night could be colder than the day was hot. Scifi watched him work, her hands mimicking his movements, learning quickly. She was small, but she was clever, and Jonah could see that. Despite her father's declaration of worthlessness, she was anything but. That night, under a sky full of stars, Jonah and Scifi communicated in silence. She pointed to constellations and used shapes in the sand to convey ideas. Jonah spoke softly, telling her about humans and their world, about kindness, curiosity, and the belief that every life had value. Sally listened, her mind absorbing each word like water to parched soil. Over the next few days, they traveled together, Jonah providing water, food, and shelter, while Sally guided him through the desert. She had an uncanny sense of direction, noticing subtle shifts in the wind and the sand that allowed them to avoid dangerous dunes and unstable terrain. Jonah marveled at her abilities. The child's mind worked differently, but it worked beautifully. She was capable, resilient, and extraordinary. Word of their journey spread to the nearest human settlement. Scientists and explorers were intrigued by reports of the alien child surviving alone in the desert. Some came to see for themselves, and each time, Sally impressed them with her intelligence, her ability to adapt, and her unshakable calm. Humans began to speak of her as a wonder, a reminder of why they valued curiosity, perseverance, and the recognition of potential. Meanwhile, news reached Baron Threxel. He had expected the child to perish quickly, as all others who did not meet his standards did. The reports of her survival and of her extraordinary abilities unsettled him. It was one thing for a failure to live unseen, but another for the failure to thrive, and in front of humans, no less. His pride, his fear of losing face, compelled him to act. He sent envoys demanding her return, citing alien law and the rights of a father. Jonah knew the confrontation would come, but he was not afraid. Humans had laws to protect those in need, and he understood the value of life that others dismissed. He would not hand Sally back to a man who saw her as disposable. She had survived the desert. She had proven her worth, and now she had a chance to live in a world that recognized her strengths rather than her differences. One morning, as the sun rose over the dunes, Jonah and Sally reached the edge of the settlement. Sally paused, looking back at the desert that had been both her prison and her proving ground. She had survived it, and she had learned from it, but she would not return. Her father's world was one of rules and limitations. The human's world offered something else, possibility. She stepped forward, holding Jonah's hand, ready to meet a new life. The Baron would arrive soon, bringing the weight of law, tradition, and authority. But Sally was no longer the powerless child abandoned in the desert. She was alert, capable, and intelligent in ways her people could not measure. And as Jonah guided her into the settlement, she felt a strange, new emotion, a sense of belonging, of hope, of recognition. The desert had tested her. It had almost broken her. But humanity had seen her for what she truly was, valuable, resilient, and extraordinary. And that recognition, simple as it seemed, was enough to light a fire that no desert, no law, and no prejudice could ever extinguish. The sun rose slowly over the human settlement, spilling soft light over the buildings and the landing pads where ships hummed with energy. Sally stood at the edge of the main plaza, her small hands brushing the smooth railing as she looked at the bustling city around her. The desert behind her was gone from view, but its lessons remained. She had survived what others had believed impossible, and now she was here, surrounded by humans who had chosen to see her for what she truly was. Jonah Hale stood beside her, quiet but watchful. He had been with her since the day he found her in the desert, guiding her, teaching her, and learning from her in equal measure. He admired her courage and intelligence. Even in silence, she spoke volumes, and Jonah understood that she was not only resilient but extraordinary. Their peace was short-lived. A fleet of alien ships appeared on the horizon, dark against the morning sky. The engines roared, stirring clouds of dust over the landing fields. At the head of the fleet was Baron Threxel himself, his ornate craft gleaming in the sunlight. He had come to claim his daughter, not out of love, but out of pride and fear. The humans prepared for the Baron's arrival with calm efficiency. They had laws to protect those in need, and they would not allow anyone, alien or human, to take Sally by force. Security drones moved into position, and negotiators readied themselves. Jonah held Sally's hand gently. He could feel her tension, but he also felt the quiet strength that had carried her through the desert. Baron Threxel stepped onto the landing pad with his entourage, his eyes scanning the crowd until they settled on Sally. He did not speak at first. He had expected her to be weak, frightened, and broken. But she stood tall, her eyes meeting his without fear. The Baron's lips tightened and he gestured to his advisors. "She belongs to me," he said in the harsh tones of his species. "Under law, she is my property. She will return to me immediately." Jonah stepped forward, his voice firm but calm. She is not your property. She is a person. Humans do not hand over children to people who abandon them. You left her in the desert to die. She survived. That makes her free to choose her life. The Baron's eyes narrowed. You misunderstand our laws. You are weak if you do not see the natural order. Children must obey their parents. Those who are not worthy are not allowed to live. Sally's eyes flickered with something Jonah had not seen before, quiet defiance. She raised her hand and drew a simple pattern in the sand with a small stylus she had brought. Lines and curves formed a map, showing the nearby FTL station and a network of energy flows that her species could never detect. She pointed at the drawing, then at the humans who had gathered, then back to the Baron. She did not speak, but her meaning was clear. She had knowledge, understanding, and value that he had ignored. The Baron leaned closer, his voice sharp. What is this? You are a child. You cannot understand such things. Jonah shook his head. She understands more than you think. She has survived where your kind would have failed. Her mind works differently, yes, but it works in ways you cannot measure. And we will not allow you to take her from a place where she is valued and safe. The Baron's pride turned to anger. He demanded proof of her abilities, unwilling to accept claims without evidence. The humans, understanding the risk, allowed Sally to demonstrate what she could do. She moved toward a control console, her hands tracing patterns in the air as sensors read her gestures. The energy flows of the settlement's FTL station flickered on the display, revealing a problem that no one had noticed before. A wave of realization passed over the human engineers. The station had been unstable, and without correction it could have caused a catastrophic failure, endangering countless lives. Sally calmly outlined a solution using her gestures and diagrams, guiding the engineers to correct the flaw. Within moments, the system stabilized. The Baron's eyes widened in disbelief. He had never seen such understanding, such precision. In his mind, children were to be obedient and uniform, not thinkers and innovators. He realized that the humans were right. Sally was more than a child. She was a mind that could see what others could not, a mind that mattered. Jonah stood by her side, proud but calm. She did what no one else could. Her life has value. She has proven it not through obedience but through action and intelligence. That is what makes her worthy. The Baron's face hardened, but there was no way to argue. The humans had witnessed the proof. His daughter, whom he had discarded, had saved lives and shown knowledge he could not comprehend. And yet, Sally did not look at him with hatred. She looked at him with quiet confidence, the same calm strength that had carried her through the desert. I do not belong to you, she communicated through her gestures, simple and precise. I am free to choose. You chose to abandon me. I choose where I live, who I trust, and how I serve. You do not control me. Baron Threxel staggered back, speechless. He had faced many rivals, many threats, but nothing like this. The humans had not used force. They had not issued threats. They had simply recognized her value and allowed her to act. That was a kind of strength he could not conquer. The human negotiators stepped forward, officially declaring Sally under their protection. Alien law was complicated, but in human space, asylum was granted to those who had survived neglect or danger. Sally's freedom was now recognized, legally and morally. Over the following weeks, Sally began her new life among the humans. She learned quickly, adapting to their ways while sharing her own unique perspectives. She helped design safer FTL travel routes, taught engineers to notice patterns they had overlooked, and inspired everyone around her with her resilience and intelligence. Humans were fascinated by her mind, and they treated her not as a curiosity, but as an equal. Jonah remained her guide, friend, and mentor, but he also learned from her. He discovered ways of thinking and observing that he had never considered, ways of seeing the world that were quiet but brilliant. Sally had survived the desert, but she had also opened a door for humanity to see new possibilities. The Baron returned once more, not with ships, but with messages pleading for Sally to reconsider. He offered wealth, power, and status, all things he valued. But Sally shook her head. She had lived without those things and had discovered a life richer than he could offer. You abandoned me, she communicated. I survived without your help. I do not need what you offer. I need what I have chosen, freedom, respect, and the chance to live fully. Baron Threxel finally understood that he had lost not through force, but through recognition of worth. Humans had seen what he could not. And in that moment, he knew that Sally's strength was not a challenge to his authority. It was a reminder that life itself could not be measured by narrow rules or tradition. Years passed. Sally grew into a young woman, brilliant, curious, and fearless. She continued to help humans explore the stars, stabilize energy systems, and discover new worlds. She became a symbol across the galaxy, a reminder that value cannot always be measured by the standards of others, and that courage, intelligence, and perseverance could shine even when all odds were against you. Jonah watched her often, proud of her growth and the life she had chosen. She had survived the desert, defied her father, and thrived among humans who had seen her worth. And yet she had not changed who she was. She remained thoughtful, careful, and quiet when needed, but she carried a power that was undeniable, the power to survive, to create, and to inspire. The desert of Karos became a distant memory, a place of challenge that had tested her spirit. But the lessons remained. That life could be won through resilience, that intelligence could take many forms, and that true worth was not measured by others, but by the courage to survive, adapt, and grow. Sally's story spread through human settlements and alien worlds alike. She was a child abandoned, yes, but she became a mind recognized, a life celebrated, and a symbol of hope. Her journey reminded everyone that humanity, with its choice to see value where others saw none, could change the destiny of a life, and sometimes of a galaxy. And so the child who had survived the desert now walked among humans, not as a victim or an outcast, but as someone who had proven that worth is not given. It is discovered, nurtured, and recognized. She was free. She was extraordinary. And she was finally home. The years passed quickly in the settlement, yet every day was new for Sally. The desert of Karos, once a place of danger and despair, had become a distant memory, but it shaped every decision she made. Humans had taught her many things: language, engineering, teamwork, but she had also taught them. Her unique mind, honed in survival and observation, allowed her to see problems in ways no one else could. Jonah Hale often accompanied her on expeditions beyond the settlement. They traveled to distant colonies, uncharted planets, and remote stations that needed guidance and problem-solving. Sally's abilities were unmatched. Her eyes, sharp and observant, could notice patterns in energy flows, structural weaknesses, or environmental dangers long before humans or her own species could detect them. People had begun to call her a prodigy, but Sally never thought of herself that way. She was simply a child who had survived, learned, and chosen to contribute to a world that valued life above all else. The settlement had grown under her influence. Humans respected her as both an advisor and a friend. Engineers relied on her instincts, scientists on her observations, and children on her stories of survival and creativity. She had become a bridge between worlds, showing that intelligence and courage could transcend the rigid definitions of one species. Yet the galaxy was vast, and peace was fragile. A coalition of alien factions, wary of humanity's growing influence, began to question the settlement's independence. Rumors of Sally's abilities had spread, painting her not only as a child of interest, but as a symbol of human ingenuity and strength. Some factions whispered that the humans were using her as leverage, while others feared that her presence proved the limitations of their own rigid doctrines. One morning, alarms echoed through the settlement. The communication tower displayed multiple incoming signals, all from ships approaching the outskirts of the colony. The fleet was large, unfamiliar, and clearly armed. Jonah ran beside Sally, both moving toward the command center. "They're coming faster than expected," Jonah said, voice tight with concern. "It looks like they're coordinating. This isn't a simple visit." Sally scanned the incoming messages, reading patterns in the fleet's formation. Her eyes narrowed. "They are not here to negotiate. They intend to intimidate." Within minutes, the alien fleet established orbit around the settlement. Their leader, a high-ranking noble from a distant system, demanded an audience with Sally. They had heard of her survival, her intelligence, and her contributions to human expansion. To them, she was not merely a child. She was a threat to their authority, a living example that their rigid systems could be challenged. Jonah stepped forward, placing a reassuring hand on Sally's shoulder. "We face them together," he said. "Remember what you've done before. You survived a desert, defied a baron, and showed humans the worth of your mind. This is no different. Stay calm." Sally nodded, her mind already working, sorting through the data of fleet positions, communications, and environmental factors. When the alien envoy arrived, she greeted them calmly, her expression neutral, her posture confident. They expected fear, hesitation, or confusion. What they received was poise and intelligence. The leader of the fleet, a tall figure with pale green skin and elongated eyes, spoke first. "You have survived against odds unimaginable, yet now you are in human hands. Your talents are being used to advance humanity. Why do you remain loyal to them when your own species might reward you with power?" Saley tilted her head, considering the question. She could have been flattered by the offer, tempted by promises of recognition or authority. But she had learned the hard way that loyalty was not measured by fear or reward, but by choice. She gestured to the settlement, then to the humans she had come to know, and finally back to the envoy. "I am loyal to life," she communicated. "I am loyal to those who value it, who nurture it, and who see potential rather than discard it. My choice is mine. Power, recognition, or titles from those who abandon me mean nothing if they cannot see the value in a life." The envoy's face twisted in disbelief. They had never encountered such reasoning. Most of their society prized obedience and conformity above all else. A mind that chose freely, that valued intelligence and life over law and tradition, was alien in every sense. As discussions continued, a sudden emergency struck. One of the settlement's energy grids began to fail, threatening the entire colony. Lights flickered, alarms blared, and panic began to rise among the inhabitants. The humans looked to Saley instinctively. She did not hesitate. Moving quickly, she accessed the control interface, tracing the source of the problem. The grid failure was complex, involving multiple nodes and hidden vulnerabilities. Saley's mind raced, connecting patterns and predicting outcomes. She guided engineers step by step, correcting faults, rerouting power, and stabilizing the system. Within minutes, the crisis was resolved. The alien envoy watched in awe. Their initial plan of intimidation had failed spectacularly. Here was a child, abandoned by her own species, preventing disaster that could have cost countless lives. Her intelligence, courage, and composure had turned the situation entirely. Jonah observed quietly, a smile tugging at his lips. He had known Saley's potential from the first day he found her in the desert. Now the entire galaxy could see it. She was more than extraordinary. She was proof that life, when recognized and nurtured, could achieve what rigid systems and prejudice could not. The envoy's demeanor shifted from arrogance to respect. They realized that they could not command Saley through fear or authority. She had chosen her path, and no force could alter it. After tense discussions, they withdrew, leaving the settlement intact and the humans unharmed. Life slowly returned to normal, but the event left a lasting impression. Saley's actions had inspired not only humans, but also many who had witnessed her strength. Reports of her deeds spread through interstellar channels, reaching colonies and councils far beyond the settlement. She became a symbol, a living reminder that intelligence, courage, and determination were not limited to those who fit a narrow definition of worth. In the following months, Saley began mentoring others. Humans, and even some aliens willing to learn, came to study her methods, her observations, and her problem-solving strategies. She taught them to value curiosity, to recognize patterns, and to understand that life's worth cannot be measured by conformity or obedience alone. Jonah often accompanied her during these sessions, but he noticed something remarkable. Saley's influence extended beyond intellect. Her presence encouraged people to act with empathy, to consider the value of every life, and to challenge assumptions that had gone unquestioned for generations. Where once humans had struggled to communicate across species, they now found common ground through her insights and guidance. Meanwhile, Baron Threxel remained distant but aware. He had watched Saley's rise with a mixture of fear and grudging respect. He knew that he could no longer claim authority over her, and the humans would not allow it. Yet he also recognized a truth that had eluded him for years. His child had surpassed his expectations not through his control, but because she had survived and learned on her own. Saley's reputation grew as she traveled beyond the settlement. She assisted in stabilizing volatile planetary environments, guided engineers in constructing safer colonies, and contributed to interstellar navigation systems that had once seemed impossible to master. Each accomplishment reinforced the lesson that the value of life, intelligence, and courage could not be measured by rigid rules or the expectations of others. Even in quiet moments, she reflected on her journey. She thought of the desert, the scorching sun, the isolation, and the pain of abandonment. Those memories no longer carried bitterness. They were proof of her resilience, the foundation of her strength. She had survived what her father had thought would destroy her. She had thrived in the care and recognition of humans who valued her for who she was. And now, she had the opportunity to shape the future of countless lives across the galaxy. Jonah remained her steadfast companion, watching with pride as Sally interacted with scientists, engineers, and explorers. He understood that her achievements were not only a testament to her abilities, but also to the human belief that every life had potential. Humanity had not created her brilliance, but it had provided the environment in which it could flourish. That recognition, simple yet profound, had changed the course of her life. As Sally looked out at the stars one evening, she felt a sense of calm and purpose. The galaxy was vast and full of challenges, but she no longer faced it alone. She had friends, allies, and a community that valued her for her mind, her courage, and her choices. The desert had tested her, the barren had rejected her, and countless obstacles had tried to define her limits. Yet she had surpassed them all. Her story, once one of abandonment and survival, had become a story of recognition, achievement, and hope. She had proven that intelligence and courage could not be measured by conformity, that resilience could overcome prejudice, and that life, when nurtured and respected, could reach heights beyond imagination. Through her efforts, humans and aliens alike began to reconsider the rigid rules that had once divided them. They saw that potential existed in unexpected forms, that strength came in many shapes, and that recognition and support could transform a life into something extraordinary. Sally became more than a child who survived the desert. She became a symbol of hope, ingenuity, and the boundless possibilities that could emerge when life was valued and nurtured. And so, Sally continued her journey, no longer the abandoned child of a baron, but a mind recognized across the stars. Her story inspired countless others to see worth where it had been ignored, to act with courage where fear had held them back, and to choose a future guided not by rigid expectations, but by the limitless potential of life itself. The galaxy watched, learned, and grew. Humanity had chosen to see value where others had seen nothing, and through that simple choice, they had changed everything. Sally had survived the desert, defied the expectations of her species, and proven that recognition, respect, and freedom could turn the smallest spark into a shining light that could guide worlds. She had become extraordinary, not because she was given power, not because she was promised greatness, but because she had survived, learned, and been recognized for the brilliance that had always been inside her. And in that recognition, both human and alien alike discovered a truth that could not be denied. Life, when valued and nurtured, could achieve wonders beyond imagination. The galaxy was changing. News of Sally's abilities and achievements had spread far beyond the settlement where she had once been rescued from the desert. Colonies, stations, and even entire planets were now aware of the child who had survived impossible odds and now guided humans in navigating the stars. Sally herself moved among these worlds with a quiet confidence. She no longer feared alien judgment, for she had faced it and prevailed. Instead, she focused on the future, on building systems, solving problems, and showing that intelligence and courage could transcend species. Jonah Hale accompanied her as always, but Sally had grown into someone who could operate independently. The human settlement had become a hub of activity, drawing explorers, scientists, and diplomats from across the galaxy. Many came to meet her, curious about the mind that had survived the desert, outwitted a baron, and saved entire colonies from disaster. Some came seeking guidance, others seeking knowledge, but all left with a new perspective on what life could achieve. On one bright morning, Sally and Jonah received a communication from a distant planetary system. The planet, called Viral, had experienced severe environmental instability. Its atmosphere was failing to regulate temperature, storms raged unpredictably, and attempts to stabilize it had failed. The colony's human engineers had tried conventional methods, but nothing worked. Sally studied the data carefully. She could see patterns in the storms, subtle interactions in the planet's magnetic fields, and anomalies in the energy flows that others had missed. "We need to go there," she said to Jonah. "If we act quickly, we can prevent the collapse of their colonies." Jonah nodded, trusting her judgment completely. They prepared the ship and set off, navigating through asteroid fields, gravitational anomalies, and uncharted space. During the journey, Sally reviewed the information she had received, drawing complex diagrams and tracing invisible lines that indicated hidden energy currents. Jonah observed her quietly, amazed at her focus and clarity. Even after years, she continued to surprise him with her insights. When they arrived at Viral, the situation was worse than anticipated. Violent storms tore through the atmosphere, and several settlements were in danger of complete destruction. The human engineers on the ground were exhausted, their attempts to stabilize the systems failing at every turn. Sally wasted no time. She descended to the command center and immediately began analyzing the energy flows, atmospheric data, and the planet's core dynamics. Her hands moved over the interface, gestures precise and deliberate. She guided the engineers to adjust the stabilizers, reroute power, and recalibrate atmospheric regulators. Jonah assisted, interpreting her directions for the team, but it was Sally's mind that saw the solution. Within hours, the storms began to subside. Temperatures normalized and the energy system stabilized. The engineers cheered, astounded that a child, someone they had initially underestimated, could solve a problem that had confounded experienced teams for months. The planetary governor approached Sally, a mixture of awe and relief on his face. "I have never seen anything like this," he said. "How did you do it?" Sally looked at him calmly, her hands still tracing patterns in the air. "I studied the systems. I looked for connections others missed. Life is complex, and stability requires understanding all parts, even the hidden ones. Humans taught me that potential should never be ignored, and that is what guided me here." Her words spread quickly through Viral's colony. People began to see that intelligence was not a single, rigid form, but something that could take many shapes. The lesson was clear. Those who are ignored or dismissed may hold the solutions to challenges others cannot overcome. As Sally's influence grew, so did challenges. Not all alien societies welcomed the example she set. Some saw her as a threat to their authority. They feared that if humans continued to recognize value in lives that their own cultures would discard, the rigid hierarchies they relied upon would crumble. Messages of warning, attempts at intimidation, and even political maneuvering reached the human settlements. Sally did not respond with fear. She responded with reason and action. When a coalition of skeptical alien leaders demanded that she cease her work on Viral, Jonah stood beside her in the council chamber. The chamber was vast, filled with representatives from human and alien colonies alike. The alien leaders spoke first, their voices harsh and demanding. "You promote ideas that challenge tradition. You allow a child to influence decisions that affect entire colonies. Humans must restrain this interference." Sally rose, calm and measured. "I do not interfere. I observe, analyze, and offer solutions. Life is at stake. My actions are guided by results, not tradition. If we ignore potential because it does not fit expectations, we risk failure. Humanity taught me that value exists in unexpected forms, and I will continue to apply that lesson wherever it can save lives." A tense silence filled the room. The alien leaders had never encountered such reasoning. Their doctrines valued control, obedience, and conformity. To them, a mind that chose freely, acted decisively, and influenced others through competence alone was incomprehensible. Yet the humans in the chamber, and even some open-minded alien representatives, understood immediately. Sally's words were not arrogance. They were truth, born from experience. The council allowed her to continue under careful observation, but her reputation had already spread further than any edict could contain. Across the galaxy, colonies began to recognize her as a symbol of what humanity had always believed. That potential, once recognized and nurtured, could achieve greatness beyond expectation. During her time on Viral, Sally discovered new talents. She began designing early warning systems for planetary disasters, methods to predict storms, earthquakes, and energy fluctuations before they occurred. Engineers followed her directions, astonished at her ability to visualize complex systems in ways they had never considered. Children learned from her, picking up not just skills but a sense of curiosity and perseverance. Even seasoned scientists admitted that her perspective was transformative. Jonah noticed that Sally had changed subtly. She was no longer just a child who survived the desert. She had become a leader, a mentor, and a symbol of hope. But she remained humble, always careful to credit those who had supported her, always patient in explaining ideas that were new to others. She never demanded recognition, yet it was impossible not to give it. One evening, as the sun set over Viral, Saley and Jonah walked on the observation deck, overlooking the calm skies. "Do you ever wonder what life would have been like if your father had not abandoned you?" Jonah asked gently. Saley thought for a moment, watching the orange glow of the horizon. "I do," she admitted. "But I also know that I would not be who I am now. The desert taught me resilience, humans taught me value. I learned strength not from being protected, but from surviving, observing, and choosing. I am grateful for what I have, even if it came from hardship." Jonah nodded. "And what you do now changes lives for countless others. You've gone beyond survival. You inspire people to see the worth in those they might otherwise ignore." Saley smiled faintly. "That is what I want. If one life can be saved, one mind recognized, one potential realized, then every challenge is worth it. Life is not about who abandoned you, but what you choose to do with the chance you are given." In the following months, Saley's work expanded beyond Viral. She visited neighboring systems, helping colonies stabilize environments, improve energy networks, and establish sustainable communities. Her guidance became a sought-after resource, yet she never treated it as privilege. Every task, no matter how small or large, was approached with focus, care, and the belief that every life mattered. Humans began to adopt Saley's principles across settlements: observation before judgment, nurturing potential, and recognizing worth in unexpected forms. Alien societies, seeing the tangible benefits of her methods, began to reconsider some of their rigid doctrines. Slowly, quietly, Saley's influence was changing the galaxy. Even Baron Threxel had heard of her latest accomplishments. He remained distant but aware, observing from afar. The man who had once abandoned her now saw the life he had rejected, thriving in ways he could never imagine. Saley had proven, not through confrontation but through action, that value cannot be dictated by law, tradition, or pride. Recognition, care, and opportunity were what made a life extraordinary. One day, a new crisis reached the settlement. A distant star was about to go supernova, threatening multiple colonies. Humans prepared to evacuate, but the paths were unstable, the calculations uncertain. Saley analyzed the star's activity, its gravitational effects, and the energy flows of nearby planets. She developed a plan to evacuate the colonies safely, guiding fleets along precise trajectories that avoided catastrophe. Her predictions proved accurate, saving millions of lives. The humans hailed her again, but Saley remained quiet, emphasizing teamwork and careful planning over personal glory. Through these challenges, she became more than a survivor or a child once abandoned. She became a force of change. She showed the galaxy that intelligence and courage could not be limited by prejudice, tradition, or fear. She became proof that humanity's greatest strength was not in weapons or technology, but in recognizing the potential in life itself. At the end of each day, Saley would often pause to gaze at the stars. The desert of Karos was a distant memory, but the lessons endured. She had learned to survive, to observe, to adapt, and to act. She had learned that recognition and support could transform a life into something extraordinary. And now, she had the chance to extend that lesson across the galaxy, inspiring humans and aliens alike to value life, intelligence, and courage wherever they found it. Saley had once been abandoned, considered worthless by her own species. Now she stood as a testament to the power of recognition, choice, and perseverance. Humanity had seen her worth when others did not, and through that simple act, the galaxy had changed forever. She had survived deserts, faced barrens, confronted fleets, and stabilized planets. And in every step, she proved one simple truth: life, intelligence, and courage, when recognized and nurtured, could overcome even the greatest odds and inspire hope across the stars.